ships have risen, and actually it's difficult to pick out the winning or the quality junior companies. Just an opinion, just a view, but I want to put that to the panel. How would you respond to that in this market at the moment? It feels like lithium's in a great place and it's doing good things for the sector overall in terms of sort of attracting more than just your regular mining investor. But yeah, why don't you start us off, Paul?
Sure. Thank you. Shanthar Pathmanathan from Chariot Corporation, joined by colleagues from Chariot here as well. So look, I think we amidst the pretty serious structural deficit in this lithium market, right? And it's sort of it's unprecedented in our lifetimes as well in the commodity sector. So the bullishness I believe typically can be dangerous, but in this case, I think it has a place because there's something like 50 to 80 lithium mines will need to be discovered before the end of this decade. And so what's going to drive that is going to be, incentive pricing and bullishness and exploration. So it's all going to have to happen through the drill bit. The flow of capital, I believe, is warranted, and more is going to happen because this is the real thing, and it's a very, very big play that's unfolding.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to comment something similar. The projections SQM announced this morning. I'm Aldo Boitano from one of those junior mining companies that aim to be in production, but 2026 projected 1.5 million tons of lithium carbonate to be new productions by 2025, 3.5 million tons by 2030, and then there's hundreds of gigafactories being built. There's a lot of the current junior mining, some production companies owned by Chinese. There's all this Inflation Reduction Act. There's all those combinations. This morning, the Chilean ambassador in the U.S., despite China being our biggest partner, followed very closely by the U.S., said that regardless of that, the great work with China and everything, that Chile was looking to work with Western countries in a sign that we're switching to more of the IRA. I mean, and the various follow-up by Europeans and so on. As one of the reasons we're listed in London, and we're very supported by the Anglo-Saxon and Germany countries on going into production and sell. But it will adjust, I think. I participated in a similar panel in Mines and Money in Miami, and out of the 100 mega factories or so, some will happen and some are not. The same with the mines, and some countries will have to postpone their projects and everything. They talk about the reindustrialization of the U.S., but there's 50 indigenous people sitting now stopping a project in the U.S. because of environmental reasons and so on. So it's somewhat complicated. Chile, on the other end, most of the new developments are at high altitude in places where there's no indigenous communities or limited flora or fauna on site. The same in Argentina, and that I think will come forward.
Yep. Touched on a lot of good points there, but Paul, allow you to unpack some of those, but then I'll go into some detail on some of those in a bit more. But yeah, please.
Yeah, Paul Lloyd from Arizona Lithium. Agree with the other guys what you're saying, but from the demand side, we've all driven an EV. We know it's going to revolutionise the industry. It's already started, and then operating in a state like Arizona. Renewable energy is massive as well. So we have a project there where people are starting to build cell plants and don't really know where the material is going to come from. So our project, I would suspect, the material will never leave the borders of Arizona. Mm. So the US and Europe have got a lot of catching up to do. And I think I've never seen this sort of demand-supply analogy in my career before. And I think the previous presenter talked about that lithium is so plentiful in the world. Well, in the US, it's a 5-year permitting process, and these projects. I come from Western Australia, a lot of spodumene production there. You can find a lot of pegmatites, but you're going to find good spodumene mines. They're not that easy to find. So I don't know where that,
Is there a misunderstanding there, perhaps, about, sure, lithium's abundant, but high quality battery grade lithium that you can deliver on contract to an OEM or someone is very different from lithium in the ground.
Yeah, very much so. and to expand that supply quickly is close to impossible. So there's a longer term deficit.
Yep. Do you think you mentioned the permitting aspect? It's always a challenge wherever you are to get it right. But do you think that's something that's sort of slowing the supply coming online? What's your experience with that across the companies that you guys run?
I think with the permitting being in Arizona, I think the president's finally worked out that the permitting is too long. Canada is a lot less, and Canada on the east coast, as we all know, is a big exploration hotspot. Western Australia with the spodumene projects I mentioned previously, they go into production very quickly as well. So the US will be left behind. Europe, maybe they're getting left behind as well. But it is being addressed by governments, so they understand the difficulties with permitting. Yeah, so that's a positive for us.
Yeah. Shanthar, how about you? With you've got Nevada, you've got assets in Wyoming as well. Is there a state-by-state issues, or is US kind of coming into one sort of consistent response?
Yeah, look, I think as a company, we've got a spread of assets in the US, right? So we've got assets in Nevada, on the Nevada-Oregon border, Wyoming, and as a company, it isn't. We take it as a given that it's a 6 to 7 year time horizon, right? But we're also at the same time worried about delivering into the structural deficit, which we see in sort of 5 to 10 years, right? So in that light, our focus is on doing the best we can with the givens in terms of permitting. But as Paul highlighted, I think we can see some policy trends unfolding as well in our favour. Yep.
Do you think that the Inflation Reduction Act, things like that, just sets a benchmark of what the agenda is, and it's going to really open up the industry from here, or has it been too little, too late?
I think the impetus is coming from the populace, right? So the voters are speaking, the younger generation are speaking, and those trends that we're seeing are going to unfold and accelerate, in my view, in terms of pushing for a greener re-industrialization as well.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, lithium, the perception of it, people start to know what it is now. The EV narrative is kind of made just, Gen Z know that, it's a lithium ion battery because I'm recycling my phones now because phone manufacturers want them back, things like that. Anyway, that's a side point. Aldo, what about Chile and the sort of the landscape there?
Yeah, Chile has half of the world's reserve. Used to be by 2017 the largest producer. Australia took over with a very fast production. They start with good offtake agreements with China, with a lot of chloride, lithium being sent and finally manufactured there. Chilean regulations ask you to have the final product before it's shipped out, lithium carbonate, and then it might be in another place of the world turning to lithium hydroxide. But the center-left government announced that they want to speed this up. The president itself had an interview a couple of days ago with a Spanish newspaper, and today the Ministry of Treasury said that it's within days to speed up the process on environmental and all the permitting, and at the same time bring the private sector into move forward. There's a talk of a national lithium company like Codelco in copper, but they already know it will take 5 to 10 years and the approval of Congress and so on. But the big change, and it also is happening elsewhere in the world, and you talk about green, is the government says all new projects has to be DLE, direct lithium extraction, and it's happening in various fronts in Europe and in the US as well. And little use of water, or the less use of water possible, and then indigenous communities and women in the workforce. So it's coming with a lot of requirements, the lithium. They said, okay, forward, but with all these new things, even though supposedly the permitting will be faster. So we're working early engagement with the communities, and we have half of the workforce women, not on purpose, just it's been happening, and trying to easy the way and to go forward. The more the merrier. I mean, the more direct lithium extraction has been for 20 years in Livent in Argentina.
Yep. And
there's so many projects in the US and elsewhere moving forward with that. I think if this year we see pilot plants and initial production of that, it will help the whole market and the credibility.
Yep. Let's delve into that technical. Or did you want to follow up? Yeah, into the technical aspects of it. How hard is it to actually produce good quality lithium concentrate. In terms of a technical skill set, the industry is growing, expanding, and it's perhaps getting the attention that it needs to develop. But there can't be too many experts in it. So it's a fairly new industry if we're comparing it to oil and gas or something. So I just wanted to get your take as developers of projects, the skill set and the sort of the expertise that's needed to get to your end goals.
I think the quality of your product is important for your sales price, obviously, but based on a particular project, you can produce an intermediate product because the demand is so huge out there. You might just produce a sulfate,
right,
and then pass that on to other companies, other people demanding that product. They can purify it, take out whatever impurities they want to take out. So I think the industry will change in that way because there just isn't the supply there. And I don't think it's, you said before about, is it a little too late to expand the supply? Well, I don't think it is. I think with GM putting 650 million into Thacker Pass, the funds are starting to flow, and that will only get greater as the demand continues to grow. And, the president's done well in the US with encouraging companies. Mm-hmm. And Europe's doing the same. So it's all being addressed. And it's just a great industry to be in. It's early days. It's difficult to build a management team for lithium, people who have experience in that, not just on the exploration, but on the development side as well. And so for young people entering the industry, a great, exciting industry to be in, and it's going to be around for a very long time. So, I'm excited to be in the industry, and, we've got 2 large development projects, and one is a brine up in Canada, and I think that's where a lot of the supply is going to come from the direct lithium extraction technology. I think that that technology hasn't been proven out yet, but it's only a matter of time. SQM are talking about some really interesting.
Is anyone commercially producing off of DLA?
Livent has been doing it for many years in Argentina.
Right.
Not at the stage that is now with reinjection and so on. They don't have evaporation ponds and they have a resin and everything, but it's not as proven mainstream and not with the new requirements of reinjection and more purity maybe. Yeah. But it's known. I mean, reverse osmosis, the ionic exchange. There's a lot of things. Right? Yeah, it's not new per se.
But you believe, is everyone in agreement that DLA is the future of lithium extraction? Right?
Definitely,
it's the present and the future.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's 3 kind of technologies underlying that. DLA was sort of a buzzword for a period, and perhaps in sort of like 2020, the lithium price spike and. I'd certainly seen it around in the media a lot, but I think a lot of people really understood what the underlying technology did within the process, and that you could have some variables of that. Could be beneficial to delve into that a little, if you can explain it in a nutshell.
I think these gentlemen are the brine.
I can.
Yes, I'll let you talk.
Yeah, it's the direct lithium extraction. Seeks to concentrate. You pump up the brine from a subsurface aquifer. It could be confined or semi-confined. One atmospheric pressure, and then it jumps up like oil. Then less, it bubbles up, and then you set up pumping rates, porosity, meaning the replacement of the rocks, volcanic rocks into the brine, and then you get a York estimate or NIE 43101, and then move that from inferred to indicated, measured and indicated, and then into reserves. But the process itself is a combination of those things, mechanical things like reverse osmosis, like nanofiltering, and then you have absorption with a resin that you need to watch. At that point, you can re-inject the spent brine down. You need to control or know the hydrogeology of the place to be able to do that, how you will affect or work with a neighbor if you share a basin, similar to the oil and gas industry in a way. And then once you finish this process with the ionic exchange, all you've done is taken the brine from whatever parts per million into 15,000 pounds per million. And then you work with the traditional chemical way that SQM and other brines use. And then you can either produce an intermediate product or the way to the final product. But there's a combination of vendors who have black box technology and want to take equity and so on, and others who don't. You talk about General Motors, but Rio Tinto acquired for a big sum a project in Argentina. Who is DLE? And I'm sure they did the due diligence and went on to do that and check. So we'll see. Hopefully soon more DLE plants, small scales and larger scales coming into play.
I think it's important to understand also that the DLE technology is applicable to that brine. So it's not just one type of technology that can be applied across the industry.
Yes, good point.
So there's a lot of people out there trying to crack the code on DLE, and I'm sure some of them will for their particular brine.
Yep.
But everyone has to address their resource and how it works. But also, adding to the point raised just then, is the ESG angle on brine is sensational. So you've got a small amount of infrastructure at surface, you're bringing water to the surface and then re-injecting. So the mining industry get criticised by the younger generation in regards to what we do to the environment. Well, this is a great example of using technology to your advantage and virtually having no effect on the environment.
But it's got to work commercially and
It does,
the produce
yes.
and just playing devil's advocate. But I want to put it back to you guys. You know, we need to see that successful company. You know, there's some European projects that have championed it because they're in Europe and the ESG is perhaps a bit more sensitive, but they haven't succeeded in it yet. Right.
The mining industry is not known for innovations in general, and a lot of the companies have to go public to raise the money. The large private investors, they check the 100%. They check all the checklists, and one of them is technology. And if it's new technology, they don't take the risk.
Yeah,
so that's why we got to go.
Additional level of understanding.
Yeah.
It's not a conventional mining player. You know, investment banks put it in the sort of chemicals bracket, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah, but it's fascinating how it's developing. Excellent. Shanthar, could I ask you sort of the hard rock advantage, and you also have a clay lithium project. How does that work?
Yeah. So look, I think with clay, we have the technological runway to be had there as well. Our focus at this stage. So the way I think about it, the above the ground stuff will evolve and get easier, right? The below the ground stuff will get more complex and challenging, right? As we need to go deeper to find more resources. So I think in my mind, if we look at this in the potential fullness of time, the real opportunity is to tackle the more complex stuff, which is the below the ground. So from our perspective, to answer your question, we're trying to, harness and secure the right technical expertise, right? Because that's going to be the advantage. And from in terms of technology, we are fortunate that we're next to Lithium Americas, which has just broken ground. So we will likely just slipstream behind them, right? Okay, but we're some way away from making that call, right? So our focus currently is on the below the ground project resource definition and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yep, excellent.
Well, I think Lithium Americas is a good example. So I think they've been at that project for about 27 years. So it gives you some idea of how long these projects take to develop.
Yeah. Do you think the cycles have harmed the development of it? So the capital challenge, or is it more just that technical, getting it right? And
yeah, definitely the cycles. It has to, doesn't it? So when the commodity price started dropping off in 2019, people who were outside of the industry were talking doom and gloom. People inside the industry knew that it would be a short term, and look where we are now. It's come flying back.
Yep.
2017, it was like 9,000 tons per. I mean, 9,000 the price of a ton of lithium, and back then they were talking of direct lithium extraction around 6. So try to make a business case with that, and then now it has dropped to 4, and then has grown up to whatever 54 today.
Yep.
The other problem with the price is not. Public, you have to buy benchmark minerals and other ways of trying to project. And sometimes you have juniors who project a very high price, and other juniors who project a more conservative price to get finance. And And a lot of companies just hold their grounds and don't invest, don't drill as we and others are doing, and put the project forward, and don't invest on PFS or things like that. So
there's some credible and perhaps more accurate sort of monitors or analysts on the price. RK Equity do pretty well, and Benchmark, as you mentioned as well. I think Fast Markets. But why had the investment banks got it quite wrong? It's quite famous, Goldman calling it quite wrong last year. Is it because they've got a big oil book, or is it because they're not getting something right in terms of the nuance of this industry?
Yeah, look, I might take that first. So I think we're playing with this is a real concept in mathematics, which is the law of small numbers, right? So we're studying a data set which is a very small subset of a future very large data set, right? So, and we're trying to extrapolate and try and understand what happens in that larger data set. So, look, I think we're at the very early stages. They're looking at things from a current perspective, and that's the immediacy of, say, an oversupply. But we've got to remember that we're only sort of 10% of the way into this industry, and I think the reality is that the trends are upon us. So and these are large scale trends, and if we want to look at the context of the scale, look at the oil industry. That's a $30 trillion industry versus a metals and mining market of about $3 to $4 trillion in revenue per annum. So totally different scale of undertaking that we're looking at here.
Yep.
Well, it's very important what he's saying. It's unheard that companies like Tesla and Toyota and all those are getting into deals. Then people have always talked about not integration and companies getting into the raw materials, and large companies and major Japanese household companies are talking. Mitsui, Sumitomo, and all those are talking into getting into the space. And it's a lot of uncertainty how many gigafactories will happen, a lot of non-binding agreements to make announcements. Everything, like you said, is the law of small numbers. We'll see when we get to the 40%, 30% of the potential market being out there, and then things will change. A lot of, again, DLE providers are black box and they want equity, something unheard in the mining industry. I think as we go forward, DLE will be mainstream with all the variances. There's not only by resin, is all companies are promoting solvent, liquid to liquid. There's various ways, and then magnesium rates. There's so many variables to be able to come up with the production on the technical side. And but the unheard in the industry is big names trying to secure supply. That's not the case in anything you can see.
If you take our sedimentary project in Arizona, it's really a big chemistry set that you need, because the mining operation is just very shallow strip mining. That's traditionally a difficult area for mining companies. And in this case, in these type of deposits, Thacker Pass, the other ones in Nevada, there's really nothing to the mining. It's all about how you process. So it's all the chemistry. And that is evolving. And I think in regards to your question about the banks, I think they got it wrong a little bit in regards to just didn't know the industry. And they talk about lepidolite production out of China. And, I'm not a processing expert, but just you listen to processing people, and lepidolite is difficult. And so how was China going to expand their production that quickly? And if they could do it, why are they buying every project in Western Australia and trying to get offtakes and are so hungry for supply if they could just expand internally?
Yep.
That was a thesis that was flawed.
Yep. Fair enough. Yep.
Yeah, look, I think the final point is that the scale of what we're about to see in lithium has not been seen before in the metals market. So I think that becomes challenging from a forecasting perspective, and it's a tremendous opportunity from a company perspective. Yeah.
And the other thing, juniors in general, they tend to start with conservative numbers, like 20,000 tons per year in the projects. We have 3 of them. When seriously, if we get bought, that's not what we're into. But if we get bought, then a large muscle company will say, okay, I'll spend it to 50,000, 100,000. but try to explain our shareholders how the dilution will be if we need to raise all that money in a combination of offtake, debt, and equity. So the actual numbers will unveil when the big players, I think, come in and those projects go forward. It will be a big shift on the potential is a lot more. A lot more. One thing is the projections right now, but if a big companies take over, they could 5 times expand the projects, any project. I mean,
So.
And I think the mergers and acquisitions will happen in the next few years will make the lithium industry even more exciting. And we had a little bit of news on Monday in regards to Liontown, and that's just one. I think there's going to be a lot more, and the industry will look very different in 3 to 5 years.
Yep, the rate of change is rapid. I just want to end on the capital raising question around sort of and some of the points you touched on around the vertical integration, and then OEMs and EV companies, for instance, looking upstream. Obviously, Lithium America's news is good. Stellantis, I think, were invested in Vulcan some equity last year rather than just an offtake. What's everyone's view on sort of the cautious offtake option versus actually sticking some equity into one of your businesses? And obviously, we want more of that. But is that dynamic changing? Are you expecting more EV companies or automotives, to be placing equity into juniors, into lithium juniors?
I think it will happen. It is happening, but most companies now are approaching it to a minority stake and get the finance and the banking and the backup, like Japanese households or big battery producers in China and so on. Of course, there could be a hostile takeover or something like that, but it's scary. There's so much, the gap between the price and the operations is such a big that you don't want to give the company away. I mean, a lot of the deals in Australia were very well done, but the price was a lot less. I don't know if a company right now will go the same path of giving a big chunk of property just with an offtake agreement, small minority shareholders with adequate protection and so on. I think that's what you'll see. That's happening in the copper industry many years, in Chile in particular, 10, 20% at most being given away for those people coming in.
Yep.
The end user investing in mining companies is pretty unusual and more than likely long-term not a good business model, but it just shows how the supply is so tight.
Yep.
And they have to do that. They don't really have a choice. I don't think they want to, but they have to. So,
Scramblers on, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, look, I think as a company, we will resist doing deals where we've got to offer anything but some of the equity and then later debt. So we'll try and stay as conventional as possible. I think that's the plan for the company, and we've got a fairly, first world mainstream portfolio that can attract, which is attracting pretty good capital at the moment. Yeah.
And if you have various projects like you have, you can start with one, and the cash flow helps develop the other ones. That's the same with us, the 3 projects. I mean, you can hold on and then, or maybe start small. And in the case of DLE, most of the plants being out there, they're scalable. You just, I built it for 20,000, 15,000, I can scale it up. Or then later on, you get some finance with a much more less dilution when it's your higher rank possibilities.
Yeah, I mean,
when you look at the gold industry, when a major comes in and takes out a junior that's just gone into production, I think you're going to see a hell of a lot of that in the lithium space.
Yep.
And you just want to be on the right one and then move to the next one.
Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah, look, I think if we're going to look anywhere on this issue, look to the car industry and the oil industry, right? 200 years later, they're very much separated, right? And there's certain economic rents at each level, and I think we should strive to what the oil industry has gotten to.
Yep, interesting. Yeah, there were a few comments on the first panel yesterday around bringing oil and gas a little bit closer to mining in that sense, perhaps not pushing it away with the ESG wand as such, and leveraging that expertise as well, or perhaps some of their capital from the oil majors moving into lithium, in the long term. Okay, well, look, are there any questions for our panel at all? Otherwise, I think we'll leave it there and we'll resume the meetings. Thanks, gentlemen, for your time.